Welcome to this first episode. I'm so excited that you're joining me today. This is our home office. It's nothing fancy. It's actually in need of a lot of overhaul. So, as I said, we started this venture a few months ago. It has been just a whirlwind of learning how to take care of animals, order food, order hay, order other supplies. So, everything that we have here in the house is a work in progress. The inside of the home is going to be the very last bits that get taken care of. So, what on earth prompted us to buy a farm and go from no horses to six horses? I do want to put a little caveat in there. We have our horse Maggie that we bought about 3 years ago, and we were boarding her with some incredible folks who live about 45 minutes from our home. They are our horse trainers. They are great people trainers. They've taught us so much about our dear Maggie. We just love her so much. So she's been a part of our life, but we didn't have her on our own home in our own property. And that was one of the main reasons that started to drive the love and passion for horses and the horse world for my husband, Rick. Not that I don't love horses and I don't love the horse world. I'm right there on it as well, but I've been more of a spectator rather than a participant. So, you know how you do that thing in your life where you talk to your spouse about someday we're going to do this and someday we're going to do that. And we really have a choice to make. Are we going to make these things happen or are we just going to talk about them? Well, we talked for years, actually, and something incredible happened one day. My husband came home and he told me that when he passed this particular property, which is now where we live, he was praying for it and he just asked God to bless it. And in that moment, he felt a response. And the response was, the property is blessed and it's going to be yours someday. Hmm. Well, at that time in our life, we had a lot of different things going on. We were thinking about, do we want to stay where we currently live? Do we want to move south? Do we want to keep the jobs that we have? Do we want to start all over? You know, you get that midlife thing. When your last kid graduates, things happen and you start thinking differently. So when Rick came home that day and shared that with me, I wasn't exactly on the same page. It was a mile and a half basically from where we were living, and it just didn't seem feasible. And the property wasn't even for sale. We didn't know anything about the property. I had to actually pull it up in my mental Rolodex and try to envision what specifically he was talking about. That's how far off the radar it was. So, fast forward to about a year and a half later, lo and behold, the property came up for sale. And how do you not go see the property that your husband said he prayed for and felt as though he was told it would be ours? So off we went and we checked it out. And I got to tell you, there were so many things about the house that made no sense to me. This was not my dream home. This is what we're graduating into as adults. This was a tough spot for me. I didn't really like it. And there were so many obstacles that I felt were going to be in the way in terms of just even accessing the home. There's a bazillion stairs. It's laid out kind of funny. Things don't really make sense to me. And yet, we looked through the barn, which, again, in my mind, I was kind of being negative Nelly, is old and need some cleanup and maybe a little repair and that kind of a thing. But being on the property, I have to tell you, something just really unusually overwhelming was happening. And I could feel deep in my spirit, in my bones, this place is it. I could watch my husband by the moment fall in love. With every step he took, he was more in love. And I could see in his mind just the churnings of possibility and dream come to life. I could see it all. And I thought, you know what? Who cares if I don't really like the house? We are at a place in our life that we get to cultivate and create what we want. So I can either live that way or I can keep finding a million reasons why it's not going to work and I don't want it to happen. So I decided that day, you need to get on board. You need to be a good partner. You need to embrace the possibilities of actually living your dreams. I don't think I'd ever really fully done that before. So we started the process and here we are. It took, we put in our offer at the beginning of July and then we moved in the beginning of October. So here we are. So October 7th, we moved in. October 8th, we received 3 horses that we had purchased. And I think it was 3 days later, we received 3 more horses that we had purchased. And then I believe it was a week after that, that our beloved Maggie was delivered from where she had been boarded. So there we were. Within a matter of a few weeks, we had an empty barn. We had 4 lovelies who were boarded here when we bought it, and they were still here. And then our 6th. So, I when I was a kid, I had a goldfish. We had a canary for a little while. We didn't have cats, dogs, none of that. So I've had some dogs as an adult, and I love them, but I've never been one who really is an animal person. So here we were with these horses, and I didn't really understand how to interact with them. I'm still learning how to interact with them. But I knew as a barn owner, I needed to know the feeding schedule. I needed to know how to take care of their stalls, clean up, where to put all the things, and interact with them. So I was eager to do that, but also very aware of my own mental obstacles and challenges that were in my way. And what do I mean by mental obstacles and challenges? I'm a person who struggles with anxiety. I am no stranger to depression. So when we have all of these things spinning, right? Big change, big shift, low on resources when it comes to sleeping and knowledge and those sorts of resources, it can kind of peak that anxiety up. Now, I've been working my entire life to combat symptoms of anxiety and depression. So that was not a new animal to me. But the horses, they were new literal animals to me. So learning how to manage my level of anxiety, because the one thing I knew about horses is that they can read you like a book. And this is one of the primary beautiful elements that I've learned about a horse. A horse will keep you so honest about who you are. So honest, in fact, that you might not know what to do with what you see in yourself, because you cannot approach a horse and pretend to be calm and confident if, in fact, you are lacking confidence and feeling nervous. They'll read you like a book and they will respond. And I knew that was the case. And I continued to respond to my husband when he would remind me, they know that you're nervous. I know. I'm trying to overcome being nervous, but how do you just step into an environment and not be something that you are? The funny thing about that is I think most of us spend so much of our time, personally and professionally, stepping into environments, trying to pretend that we are something that we don't fully believe we are. And I say that because as a leader, I have felt that, and I have watched other leaders as they've grown and matured through that process. I just don't know that there's any way out of that. I think the only way to get through it is to be present in it and push through it. So it didn't take long for me to realize, oh boy, here's an interesting parallel that is happening already. I have to own who I am, and I have to embrace it rather than fight it and work with what I have to accomplish the goal and the mission that I'm seeking to accomplish. And my goal and my mission with these horses was to build relationship, and continues to be to build relationship. Now, that doesn't mean I'm looking to be a horseback rider or a competitor or anything of that sort. It means that I want to be able to talk to them, feed them, clean up after them, take care of them without being terrified. It might sound like a no-brainer to someone who's done this before or just doesn't have that sort of fear-based wiring. But I want to say that fear-based wiring, as much as it can irritate people who don't fully understand it, it's not a choice. It's there. There's a long history of how it got there and why it stays there. My choice is to not kind of surrender to that fear, but to push through it and master it and overcome it. So there's a lot of unmastery that is still existing in my headspace when it comes to my interactions with the horses. But what they're making me do, they're making me reflect on that and think about, if that is how I am at this point in time in this environment, am I taking any of that and bringing it into other environments that I'm showing up thinking that I'm one way, but maybe acting in another way? Am I showing up in those environments confident, or am I showing up looking confident, but really trying to deal with the inside anxiety and fear of what's really going on? All of it lives in the same space. Yes and yes, no and no. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. What does that mean? The horse is so incredibly sensory wired. The horses have taught me that when I rely on my brain only and I shut down my senses, I am not giving myself the ability to be completely tuned in and present. And then, of course, authentic, which that's a word that can spark people into debate. But really, I do want to show up in a space that is authentic to who I am, whether it's in a boardroom, in a coaching, or in the barn, or in my marriage. It doesn't matter where you are and what you're doing. How you show up is what matters. So, my hope was that I would be able to learn, how are these interactions with what the horses are reflecting back to me going to challenge me to be more real and more authentic and master the strengths and be a little more forgiving and gracious with myself around some of the weaknesses. What I've learned about horses is that they are wired for survival. They do not have a frontal lobe. They do not have executive function. Their brain doesn't operate the same way our brains operate. So we don't have that part in common. But what we do have in common, which I find fascinating, is because they are prey animals, they are herd animals, and they are constantly responding to sensory stimulus. They are 100% on high alert all the time. And when I heard that, I thought, well, the horses that I do know are so conditioned and they're not acting as though they are constantly in survival mode. I have witnessed some horses who definitely display that, but the horses that I had seen, which again, we go back to the barn where we boarded our Maggie. Those horses were experienced. They had been taught. They had been conditioned. They had been loved. They had been trained. So they were acting in a way that didn't allow me, someone who doesn't fully know or appreciate what I was really looking at from their communication. They were showing a horse that was balanced, stable. You would never know that they are wired in survival mode. So when I learned that about horses, I thought, well, that's something I do have in common with a horse. Our brains don't work the same way, but can I relate to feeling like I'm in survival mode, being conditioned, being trained? being loved, being fed, being taken care of. The things that would bring me peace and not make me feel in survival mode are the same things that would bring a horse peace and not feel like they're in survival mode. I thought that was a pretty interesting revelation. Okay, so there's something to build from. Learning how to read horse body language. I can't tell you how many YouTube videos and podcasts I've been listening to just to understand how to read their body language. I know they can't talk to me and I know their body is telling me something, but if they can read me like a book, I want to be able to read them like a book too. So I learned that the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, the neck, the body, the legs, and the tail, all of that in combination will tell you how they are, what they're feeling, what might be going on with them, and what kind of mood they might be in. It sounds simple when you're looking at it on a YouTube video, but then to come home, I'd go right out to the barn and I'd look at the horse and I would just stare at it. These horses, they must, now their brains don't work the same as ours, but I'm sure they had a few moments of, what in the heck is this lady doing? Because I would just watch and I would look and I would be so desperate to know how do they feel? What can I learn from them? Are their ears pinned back? No, but they're up. Are they doing this thing, for the radar? What are they listening to? Can you see the whites of their eyes? If you can see that, then they're afraid or maybe they're angry. Are they in pain? Are they holding tension? I would hear the playbacks of the podcasts and the videos in my own mind, and I would just watch and feel like I was getting nothing. And I thought, well, why aren't they telling me anything? And there's a couple reasons for that. One, because I would get myself so prepared to go out there and try to manage my own anxiety that I would go out, really drawn in. And what I've learned about horses is how you show up with your energy has a lot to do with, actually everything to do with how you're going to read and perceive their energy. So I'd spent all this time trying to calm myself down and not be afraid to go and interact with them, that I was showing up in their space, kind of like this, like nothing. So they weren't giving me a whole lot back because they didn't know how to read me. So here I'm thinking I'm champion of the world because I'm not terrified. I got myself calm and chilled out, but there's no benefit to being so chilled out that you don't even exist in the space. Another parallel that brought me back to what other environments am I going into that I'm so nervous on a social level that I'm putting all these strategies in place to show up calm, cool, and collected so that I can not look like I'm going to do something to embarrass myself or all those other anxiety provoking thoughts. And then just show up and be like a cool bowl of soup. Like what is that? Nobody wants that. Where's the person? Where's the spark? Where is the energy and the connection? So I had to sit with that and reflect on that and say, there's some parts about me that I think are kind of cool and worthy of sharing with other people. But if I am so flatlined that is impossible and that's on my doing, nobody even has a choice to decide if they want to hang with me or not. That's something I need to evaluate and take some action on. I already thought, these horses are surprising me. They're surprising me with the way that they require connection. And it can't just be about what works for me to get calm and numb enough. There's no surprise that rhymes with dumb enough. We do it so much as anxious people. We numb ourselves to the point that we cannot interact. We are just surviving. There it is again, survival mode. If this horse is a being that has been genetically predisposed for survival mode, and yet they're here trusting me enough to be in their space without being terrified, maybe I can do the same. Maybe I can show up in their space not be terrified, but actually show up as who I am so that we can really start to figure out who each other is to the other one. Am I going to be the person who does training? Not today, but am I a person who can show up and be eager and be open and be ready to explore while I feed and nurture and take care of and learn and ask questions about who they are? Yeah, yes, I can do that. So it's been just under 3 months, and it's taken me about 2 months to get to the point where I can be open, right? So I'm not guarded anymore. Well, sometimes I am. We have a couple horses who are a little mouthy, and I don't mean mouthy like telling me off. They are mouthy because they're babies. They're 3. So it's kind of like when you ask a toddler to put something down and they just look at you like, why would I do that? It's kind of like that same mentality with a 3-year-old horse. They're learning, but they don't have that full capacity of understanding and following. They have to be taught the signs, the signals, the messages of communication, and then be rewarded with safety and praise. So I'm still learning that for myself, but I know that is the goal and that is the way to get there. Kindness, respect, love, interest, the ability to read and respond. Now, in other environments in my life, I can read and respond, and I can do that with respect. So if I can do that with humans, there's no reason why I can't do that with horses. And for those of you who are feeling the same thing that I'm feeling, like the awakening of, oh, reflection, isn't it funny how having a misunderstanding, it's not even a misunderstanding first, it's a level of ignorance first. Once you get past the ignorant spot, then there's opportunity for misunderstanding. But we're so eager to just jump in and understand everything and master it based on the way we want to do things. A horse will not let you do that. And as humans, I don't think it's respectful to do that to each other either. But we've been conditioned and we've been taught and we've been trained. So this journey is going to be an interesting one as I figure out what parts of my own training and conditioning will apply to the horse relationship and what parts I need to blow out of the water. It's going to be an interesting ride. And as I learn those things by loving these animals, I'm going to be super pumped and excited to share with you the parallel dynamic of humaning, right? So human to human, there's so much in those relationships that we bring for good intention, but we don't always respect what is actually there. We see it in marriages. We see it in parent-child relationships. We see it in teacher-student relationships. We see it in employee-employer relationships. We see it everywhere. We've lived it. We've experienced it. I thought I had gotten to a place where I just knew how to be in that space, and I was good at it. It's not that I'm not good at elements of leadership, but being led in a relationship by a horse to understand myself better is going to challenge me and force me to look at the leader that I really am and look at where I do have so much opportunity to grow, evolve, and get better. So I thank you for sharing this time with me. I can't wait to keep bringing you little pieces of the relationships that are unfolding and building and growing and thriving here on our farm. Until the next time, go do something great. Be bold, be brave, and have fun.